Hello and welcome to WTO Forum. Few could doubt the historical significance and importance of the multilateral institutions in creating a framework for global peace and prosperity. But these great institutions were created in the last century, and severe economic circumstances and a profound geopolitical shift have complicated their efforts at trying to solve the problems of the 21st century. This has raised questions as to whether these multilateral organizations and multilateralism itself can deliver. The failure of governments to reach agreements in areas like trade or climate change have added further doubts to the ability of these organizations to succeed. So the question today is multilateralism in crisis? And if that's the case, what can be done to set it back on a course for success? We're very fortunate to have with us today two experts on multilateralism, Anabel González, Costa Rica's Minister of Foreign Trade, and Eduardo Pérez Motta, the head of Mexico's Federal Competition Commission. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anabel, let's start with you. Are we in crisis?
Well, I think the short answer to that is no and yes. No, as it relates to the WTO in particular, I believe that this organization has a number of functions that are performing quite well. The dispute settlement resolution function is working very well. The surveillance function is working very well. We have a number of countries that want to be members of the WTO, and the recent accession of Russia is a case in point. And more recently, the WTO has reinvented itself to continue to promote development through the Aid for Trade initiative. So I would argue that as regards those functions, the WTO is alive and well. Now, if we look at the negotiating function, which is a very important function because it's that of defining new rules to address problems that we are facing in the world economy, that is certainly confronting difficult moments, as the Doha round has been out there for more than a decade now, and we have not been able to find solutions. Now, I believe that in the area of trade, as in the area of global warming, or in the area of finance, or in the area of security, these are global problems that demand global solutions. So I do think that we need to revitalize the multilateral trading system in the WTO and elsewhere to be able to address these challenges.
Eduardo?
Well, yes, I think that we are in times of challenges. I think that's the main point. We start from a very strong institution, which is the WTO. It's a very strong institution composed by a very solid secretariat, very efficient, very professional. We have a set of rules that still work and work well. Anabel was talking about the dispute settlement mechanism. At this moment, I am chairing a panel between two important parties of this house.
A dispute settlement panel.
In the dispute settlement panel. And I'm sure that anything we could decide or decided by the appellate body is going to be respected by the parties. So that tells you that we have a strong system, but this is a system that has to be modernized, that this is a system that through negotiations has to respond better to realities and has to do something that I think is key, which is to recoup the trust in markets, in market-oriented policies, because market-oriented policies were well designed. When they open the door for exit and entry of business people, and through competition, they create the conditions to make markets more efficient, to promote research and development, to promote the use of best technologies, the best use of resources. I think this is the only way we can generate growth again. And my trust is that in this time of challenges, the international crisis in which we are living now is a good opportunity to rethink again on how the WTO should move forward in order to be more efficient and in order to respond better to the necessities of our societies.
Given the contribution that the organization is making now, it it begs the question, given the difficult economic circumstances we're encountering, given the trade tensions that are accelerating, where would we be now if the WTO wasn't here?
Oh no, absolutely. And I think, the one very important starting point is for countries to acknowledge the value of the institution and to acknowledge that, yes, we're going through, a huge rebalancing, as you were mentioning, both in terms of political terms, in economic terms, but that in this rebalancing, there is a very important role for this organization to play. And I would like to, look not only backwards to see all the contributions that the organization has made, but I think that we should look forward and think the role for the organization in the future. And when you engage in that exercise, I believe you realize that leaving aside short-term differences that different players may have, considering this rebalancing that is taking place, we still should find the will and the way to put the system back on track.
Yeah. Do you share those views, Eduardo?
Yes, I think that your question is a good counterfactual situation that explains very well how this institution is a solid institution that has a very strong background. This month is going to be 10 years after we had a failure in Cancun in the Doha discussion. At the same time, this month is going to be 10 years since we generated in the International Competition Network, which is an organization that I'm chairing at this moment, and that has all the antitrust agencies of the world, which we are now almost 130 members of that organization. But this month is going to be 10 years since we created the first best international practices on mergers. And it is interesting because 10 years ago, in the WTO, we stopped the discussion between competition and trade. But competition has been developing in a parallel way, in a parallel fashion. And markets need these two instruments. They need trade, because this is the best source of competition for manufacturers, for instance. But they need also competition policy, because competition policy is the best instrument to generate efficiency, especially in those sectors that are non-tradable, those sectors which are services, and those sectors happen to be the heart of the productivity of our communities. And that is moving, not as fast as we would like to, but it's moving. And I hope that this, as I said before, this international crisis in which we are involved, that includes very big countries, very big parties of this game, is going to be an opportunity to reshape and to restart the discussions on how we should move forward in the multilateral system. And then, at the same time, we have to continue in other organizations like the International Competition Network to continue promoting efficiency in our markets, because, as I said, the only instrument we have to generate growth, opportunities of employment, and better income distribution conditions is through a very well-designed market-oriented policy.
Anabel, your final thoughts.
I think there are different things that we can start doing. I think the discussions, for instance, on trade facilitation are reaching a point where we should be able to harvest an agreement relatively soon. I think we can also think about leveraging the work of the regular committees of the WTO and bringing new issues into the discussion to begin to explore things that are happening out there and that are relevant for the system and for the members, such as, for instance, global value chains. And I think we should begin also considering other options such as plurilateral negotiations to inject some dynamism into the system. So I think maybe they're not the traditional routes that we have followed in the past to advance the negotiating function of the WTO, but I think some of this can be important mechanisms to revitalize the system.
Eduardo, you have the last word.
Well, we are, as I said, we are in times of challenges, times of international difficulties. And crises are always the best opportunities we have to come forward with new ideas, with new proposals and with new designs. I think we have to reflect on how the international trade system has to move forward. If it needs to do it with Doha itself, or it needs to redefine a little bit in a more open way how it needs to move. But we have to be creative, and I think we have to be open at this moment.
Eduardo Pérez Motta, Anabel González, thanks very much to both of you, and thanks to you for watching WTO Forum.